So, welcome. As I was saying, it's amazing to see so many people. When I thought about combining yin yoga and delivery in a talk, I felt like that was really niche. So it's really lovely to see so many faces. My name's Faith. I'm a delivery person. I've been a delivery person for 2 full decades of my life at work now, and I'm currently head of delivery, project and program management at Heard Consulting. And Heard are an award-winning consultancy. We are currently 35 team, multidisciplinary team. We've got experiences across the service sector, predominantly in public services, education, healthcare and financial services. And we really specialise in 2 key spaces. So in discovery, so this is all the tricky upfront stuff you need to do to set yourself up for success. So things like opportunity pipelines, pre-discovery, and also the discovery phase itself. And we're also good at delivery recovery. So this is when your projects or programs maybe weren't set up for success, or maybe things have changed. That's when we come in and we work with you to get things on track. And the other thing about Heard is that we're a team that are really made up of experts. So it's really important to us. We're people that have seen it all in the real world. So we've got a lot of people who have been heads of product, head of business analysis, user-centered design, this kind of thing on their CV. And we're not about introducing, one-size-fits-all works. We're a really pragmatic group of people who appreciate context and every workplace being different and the importance of meeting people where they are. So the intention of this talk is really to fit in with that. So there's no formal frameworks here. I'm going to tell you a story and what we did about it. And what I'm hoping is that you get some pragmatic ideas that you could apply to your opportunities at work. And it's also an approach that I think would work with projects and programs that have drifted or maybe been blocked for a while. So these are the kind of things that leave you having a sense of, like, where are we with that one again? The stuff that keeps coming round and coming round. And I'm going to make a case that a lot of this rests on decision making. And an early promise to you all, I don't mention decision logs once, okay? It's not about the decision log. I was recently in a board meeting, and this was a couple of weeks ago. I had about 15 people on my team's meeting grid. And we were midway through a really tricky discussion about 2 competing priorities. So one was from finance, one was from HR. And there was one team that had the skills and knowledge to deliver against both of these things. And the deputy director of HR raised her hand and asked, and with visible exasperation, how do we make a decision in this place? And the next 10 minutes were golden for me to listen to how that unfolded. And it gave me this reassurance that through this uncomfortable but necessary conversation we were having, privately, I was like, okay, what I've got to say here in this talk is hopefully going to be useful. The decision making is slow and it's complicated and it's frustrating. And I think that's probably a universal experience. And it's a big underlying risk to delivery as well, which is where my interest obviously comes in. So what I'm going to do is share a gnarly work story, something that's happened to me this year, what we did about it, which is where the exploration squad comes in. And I'll explain what a squad is and what makes a squad succeed. But before I do that, I wanted to ask you all, what's slowing down decision-making where you work? And I'd love for you to use the chat, perhaps using in a word or a short sentence, and think about the stuff where there's complexity and the stakes are high. Maybe it's taken you a long time to get where you are. Perhaps there's lots of options, costs, long-term impact. And I'd love to see the types of responses, the sort of things that you're dealing with at the moment. Too many cooks. Yeah, okay. Yeah, lots of people. Lack of clear strategy, interesting. Scared to make a decision, yeah. Yes, yes, okay. So it's interesting for me seeing how a lot of this rests on people and how those people are relating to one another. Okay, so hopefully reading some of that, it gives you a sense of reassurance that you're not alone. There's lots of people going through similar frustrations at the moment. And I'm really confident this work story is going to cover those themes that you've written in the chat there. So at the start of this year, I was asked to go into a large internationally recognized organization, and they had a business case that was stalled. So I was in a team of 3. My role was the delivery voice, and I had a business analyst and a product manager I was working with. And this business case was for a new learning management system to replace an existing legacy platform, which was now out of support. And the ask was, please find us an owner. Without an owner, we're blocked. So find us an owner, we can move forward again. And for the first 2 weeks, we spent as much time as possible meeting as many people as possible to understand the landscape. So we met with nearly 30 senior stakeholders in different departments across the organisation. And what I started to notice is that we would join the call, introduce ourselves, what we were about, what we were trying to achieve. And there was this visceral, visible reaction. So people would kind of sink back into their chairs. They were sort of looking down at the floor. There were these big sighs. There was a lot of emotion and a lot of feeling. And I've rarely had to work as hard as I did to encourage people to open up and share their experiences. But once they did, we would get these long stories and histories that were fascinating to listen to. So there was this folklore that had built up around this thing that spanned years and years of history. And I realized as well, I was in a real position coming into this organization because training is one of the best ways to get to know how an organization works, because it touches on so much operationally, lots of departments, obviously with compliance, learning development, and also hopes and dreams for the culture. So the project had been requested a couple of years ago, and there'd been a significant period of discovery that had taken place the year before. And this was all really good stuff. They'd done a lot of deep work thinking about user and business needs. And this had led to this large business case document with an incredible amount of detail. And at the end of the document, it was asking for £1 million, multi-million pound investment over a number of years. And this slide has a quote from the most senior stakeholder that we met with. And this was someone that the CIO reported into. And she said, and this is word for word from this interview, what is this for? Is it good value for money? So they weren't clear on what they were actually getting, and they were confused. So here we were, and this is what I mean about covering a lot of those themes that you were writing in the chat. We didn't have a business sponsor. We had multiple departments with many different user groups, different needs, legacy technology landscape that was holding up, propping up the way things were currently done. And we had to change. So our ambition was, can we help this organization make a decision and come out of this gridlock? We needed to empower the people in charge with the right information so that they could, in a sense, be set free and consciously say, this is our position and our decision. And we were aware that decision could look like, let's invest, or it could be, no, this won't go ahead. And there were lots of activities that you'd recognise from a typical delivery, product and business analyst role. This isn't the talk for the detail of that, but just to give you a feel for that, a lot of distilling the pain points that we were hearing when we were meeting people, gap analysis of what had already been produced, stakeholder mapping, business requirements. I had an assumption spreadsheet that we were working through and testing, and I was coordinating the day-to-day of what needed to be done. So who we needed to speak to, what areas to explore next. And a lot of it had a feel, almost felt like a detective. Like we were digging deeper and deeper into this stuff. And the what is this for really hung around us. So we had this business case. It was a big document, lots of important information, talking about technology constraints, risks, dependencies. It had an executive summary on the first page, and on there it spoke about robust functionality, scalability, compliance features. And what was coming across was the vision was to provide the platform, the technology, and a team to service it. What it didn't do was mention in a sentence defining or measuring the value of doing the thing. And this is said with a lot of understanding, like particularly with anything inward facing for staff. This is a really hard thing to do. But it's the part that will get your senior decision makers interested and able to take action. So at Herd, we've thought about this a lot. And as I mentioned, we've got a lot of experienced people, ex-heads off across lots of different sectors and backgrounds. So we've seen this type of thing before. And in really plain language, the headline whys for staff-facing change tend to fall into 3 categories. Make life easier, improve decision-making, and compliance with regulation. So we started to get really curious about what was happening in these areas. So training is obviously essential for compliance, but the current system's ability to report, which is a key part of meeting compliance, was really flaky and unreliable. And this was creating an overhead on departments who had to manually compile reports on who had completed training. So we were like, okay, that's interesting. Let's dig a little deeper. And we started to hear stories about just how much time, and it was a lot, sometimes up to 2 days a month. And these were really senior people, like heads of departments. And digging even further, we found out there were at least 100 heads of department. So this is a really big organization. And when looking at the time spent, it meant this organization was spending up to 1,600 hours a month in spreadsheets, manually reporting on training completion. So now we had tangible numbers and figures and something measurable that we could try with our stakeholders. So around about week 4, we met again with our most senior stakeholder, and we explained the business case on 1 page. And we were outlining the compliance risks and showing the context between this business case and wider documented organisational risks. This is a really highly regulated sector we were in. And we could see that training impacted around half the entries on the organisation's risk register. And also we had these efficiency savings. And for the last half of our meeting, there was a shift. So our senior stakeholder had come to and said, what is this for? And we'd shifted that to, there's lots more we can use this for. So we got a list of other areas we could use a learning management system for. And our senior stakeholder was excited and passionate about the business case. So this got me thinking, what were we doing that had created such a vibe shift? And this is something that we've replicated and repeated since then on other projects. So I'm confident there's a formula here that works. So what I've tried to do next is distill our squad into its 5 key ingredients, like what set us up for success. And I'm hoping it's these ingredients that might prove 1 or 2 moments of inspiration for you that you can take back into your day-to-day life at work. So in simple terms, an exploration squad, this team of 3 that I was in, is a problem-solving team who help you fix cross-departmental challenges. So the key thing here is I wasn't on my own, and I couldn't have reached the same outcome on my own. I was in a trio with a product manager and a business analyst. So what's so special about a small team of 3? And there's lots of research and known approaches where 3 is seen as a sweet spot. So I know lots of you are going to be familiar with 3 Amigos, for example, which comes out of the Agile software development community. And that's a name that's been given and used for the last 15 years at least to describe where a developer, a tester, and a business analyst, and that can also be the product owner, come together and discuss a user story before development begins. And each of those roles is bringing a perspective. So the product owner focuses on the problem and what the requirements are. The developer is bringing this perspective of how, like the technical feasibility. And the tester is there to concentrate on how are we going to meet these defined acceptance criteria. And what you get is a lot more clarity up front, which further down the line means less rework. So you get of speed and quality coming together. And then at a leadership level, you often see the executive triad. So you often see a strategic leader who owns the vision. That's often your CEO. You have an operational leader, your COO, who's all about the execution. And then a financial or data leader who's about making sound decisions, and that's your CFO. So what the research in this space is saying is that it's really good to be around people who are different from us. It makes us more creative, more diligent and hardworking as well, because it's encouraging us to consider novel information. And this novel information leads to better decision making and problem solving. So it can literally change the way you think for the better by working with other people. And there's some great research that came out last year. I love this paper. It's called Team Size and its Influence on Teamwork and Communication. So this paper has pulled together evidence showing that in smaller teams, you tend to have clearer, more direct communication. And in that kind of space, you're able to foster deeper relationships, and deeper relationships equal trust. So smaller teams are really great at completing complex tasks. Where you've got larger teams, they tend to do better in more structured environments. And the key thing from this research paper was that the talent and level of individual intelligence of the team members contributed much less to the success of a team than you might expect. So it was much more about the team's collective intelligence. And that was defined by things like high level of social perceptiveness, which is essentially emotional IQ, obviously that thought diversity, and large amounts of communication, which was evenly shared. In our squad, we were all bringing a unique lens from our backgrounds, from delivery of, product and business analysis. So as a delivery person, I was there owning the planning, the coordination, the reminder of time, the breaking down, the how are we going to get there? As a product manager, the wonderful James, who I was working with, was coming and asking lots of questions around value for the user, why we're doing a thing. And once you grasp this, you're able to define the vision and the priorities, which can help you unblock the problem. And wonderful Alex, the business analyst that we were working with, kind of sat somewhere in the middle of that, actually. She brought this razor sharp eye for detail, spotting gaps, and also this ability to distill information into something everybody could understand. The alchemy was really in the middle, where we blended. So we didn't rigidly stick to, this is my job, this is your job. We were fluid. And that's really where the magic lies. When we ran a retrospective on this period, one of the post-its that was written was that it was a joyful way of working where members naturally supported each other, and that there was a blurring of roles, like strong support, a safe space for challenging one another. So really a direct experience supporting that research paper. And also it's really important to explain where we were operating organisationally. So I'm sure some of you will be familiar with flight levels. It's a really great model that helps organisations align their strategy with the day-to-day operations within a team. And with the examples I've given, 3 amigos is at a team level. So that layer 1, it's day-to-day, it's operational. The executive triad is obviously the 3rd layer, the strategic layer. Where we were as an exploration squad was in that flight levels 2, around coordination. And this is really a defining aspect of the exploration squad. It's opportunities, projects, programs that are across multiple teams. And often they're things that are introducing new services, new ways of working. I've worked on business cases in the past that have been around helping the developer experience team prioritize technical debt to modularize their code base to help speed up developer time. And also a new design system. And a design system obviously spans multiple teams, from branding all the way through to QA, and touches on changing ways of working in lots of profound ways. With the learning management system business case, it had stalled in this 2nd coordination layer, with a lot of frustration in that team layer and a lot of confusion in the layer above who had to make that decision. So 3 perspectives, often more effective than just one. The 2nd ingredient is to appreciate decision-making is really hard, and to have a lot of empathy for those involved. So there's a lot of research in this space, particularly in the medical field, as the stakes are so high, but the principles can be applied in lots of places. The 2 findings that I found really interesting when I was going through the research were high job demands overwhelm decision-making ability. So if you think about that most senior stakeholder that we were meeting with and how much must come across her desk day to day, the practical implications of that is the importance of plain language, of simplifying. We should be able to distill what we've got to say on 1 page. And then the 2nd thing was around poorly managed environments, just undermining that ability to be collaborative. And what I mean there is lots of silos. And I think it's really rare. I'd be surprised if anyone's working somewhere at the moment where they don't experience a bit of this, at least, where you have departments and teams that maybe don't talk to one another. And this makes decision-making even harder. The practical implication of that is that we need to create the spaces to ease it. So you need to think about communication, and this is online and offline, where people are already meeting, or whether you need to open up new spaces to talk. And it's really important to act on this stuff, because not making a decision is harmful to the culture of your organisation. So some ways that it can harm are giving people this sense of wasted effort, like people feeling that their time is being squandered. And we definitely felt a lot of frustration on the business case, a sense from a few people, you know, we've already been here, why are we revisiting this? And also at times picking up on this sense of demotivation, almost like a listlessness, because there's a feeling of we've lost agency, we've lost control. And obviously on the very far ends, like being in limbo can be quite anxiety and stress inducing. And when thinking about our senior stakeholders, just that cognitive overload of constantly tracking pending decisions, it burns a lot of mental energy. It's tiring. And then also not to mention the cost of people and teams working towards a decision. And we estimated that the organisation had spent maybe close to £1 million on the discovery and the business case, just the effort involved. I briefly wanted to mention an approach from Amazon, which you might find helpful to think about, because every discovery that you'll go through is likely to uncover unknown questions, challenges. And if you're not conscious of this, it can create an endless cycle of inquiry. So at Amazon, they've introduced this concept of the 70% rule. So if you're roughly 70% there with information and confidence, it's probably time to move. And you can make this judgment based on how much risk is involved. So it could be things like how much financial loss potentially, or the reputational impact. So it can be on a range. Some things, maybe 50% is good to go. Maybe some things you need a bit more, 80%, 90% either. With us, one of the things that had slowed the business case down was uncertainty about how the technology was going to integrate with a very large program introducing a new system. And that was due to go live in a couple of years' time. So we advocated for, we don't have all that information right now. We need to have open lines of planning and communication with this program, work with the principles that we know now, and ensure that as more is known and unfolded, it gets incorporated into the roadmap. The third ingredient is the importance of naming the problem and why it matters. So on day one, as I've mentioned, the brief was, this business case doesn't have an owner, help us find one and unblock us. On day 20, we were understanding the problem to be, the organisation does not have a strategy for training its various users. And without this, any proposal to tackle training at an organisation-wide level will fail. And it's a really different conversation at this point, day one versus day 20. Getting to the root cause of what's causing your block decision making will create this organizational self-awareness. It's really empowering for you. It's really empowering for those in charge. So here's something to think about. What you might notice is the problem you first think you're solving is sometimes a symptom rather than a root cause. So along with knowing the real problem you're solving is explaining why it matters. So I spoke earlier about digging deeper into efficiency savings. And when we analysed the 1,600 monthly hours being spent on manual reporting, that trend, when looking over 5 years, was close to £2 million in cost when equated to salary. And then there were also the fines to do with not meeting compliance and regulation. So something like GDPR, for example, breaches there can cost millions. So we suddenly had numbers and figures, and we had something measurable to try with our stakeholders, which could fit on one page. And the fourth ingredient is one that I feel particularly aligned to as a delivery person. It's about time. So we had 6 weeks to help this organisation reach a decision, and we were not going to answer everything in that time. As I've mentioned, we weren't going to be able to answer how integrations were going to work with a programme that was due to go live in a couple of years. And we couldn't outline all the infinite ways the change impact would be felt. We knew the end goal was a decision. So to get there, we were doing things like setting ourselves weekly goals. We were collaborating daily, regularly discussing assumptions. That was key. And an understanding of these are the highest priority things we need to test. And as we reached our 4th week, our biggest assumption to test was that a training service was a strategic priority for this organisation and therefore was going to be funded. And this leads really nicely onto the final, and I would argue the most important point, which is about mindset. And if I was to distill our qualities as a 3 down to its core, I would describe us as curious, a genuine interest and care for what we were hearing, a desire to ask questions and listen, but alongside this, to always tell the truth, like even if it wasn't easy. And to do all of that, we needed to be brave. So there's a lot that's been written and expressed about creating safe spaces in the last few years, and it's a concept I hold very dear, especially when working with teams. So safe spaces are ones which prioritise the emotional comfort and security for people to express themselves freely. But it's a challenge to guarantee that in terms of like, this is an 100% safe space to come into. What I think we were doing is a little different, and I've coined it as a brave space. So we were able to push one another out of our comfort zones and embrace challenging ideas. There was a lot of critique going on. And to do that, we were able and having to engage with discomfort at time. It required a very active participation in our experience as a team and applied to us as a trio. So inward looking, how we were working together, but also how we communicated to our stakeholders. So I recently caught up with the product manager, James, and I asked him what made it work. He knew I was preparing for this talk. And he said to me, we often talked about what we felt to be true and discussed these assumptions. And we would hold each other to account if we found things which contradicted or disproved those assumptions. And to do that needs trust. And I felt we quickly learned to trust one another. And this is where I go a little off business script. So outside of my 9 to 5, I'm also a yoga teacher. So I've been a yoga teacher for around 10 years now. And the style of yoga that I now teach is called yin. And yin yoga has a lot to teach you about bravery and discomfort. So in yin, we're on the floor. We're holding some deep stretches. We're often focused around some tight, big muscle groups like our hips. And we sit in stillness for up to 5 minutes with nothing going on but our thoughts, our sensation, and our breath. And I think people sometimes come to yin because there's this perception, oh, that's the easy style. There's no handstands, there's no headstands in yin. But it's really actually radical to be still and feel in this way. This is me teaching yin this summer at a festival my friends run called the Wilds Festival. Highly recommend. They're doing it next year. And there's around 50 people here holding what's called butterfly pose. And this is where you bring the soles of your feet together, the heels away from your groin, knees apart. And there's a ton to feel. There's a ton going on around your inner legs, your hips, your low back. And what we're practicing in yin is like meeting these uncomfortable moments with curiosity and acceptance. And you start to recognize the impermanent nature of the physical and the emotional experience. And the secret sauce, in my opinion, with yin isn't necessarily the stretch itself. It's what happens when you come out of the stretch. And in yin, we call this the rebound. And you basically get this incredible feeling of release and relief as well. You've had the opportunity to process something physical and sometimes mentally and emotionally too. And there's this feeling of moving towards just an inner balance, perhaps even like an inner sense of peace. So here I am, back in the summer. I've gathered people to practice. And it's occurred to me, this isn't that dissimilar, believe it or not, to the process that we had to go through as an exploration squad. So we were really helping the organisation process something uncomfortable, to be aware and to be accepting of where they were. And we had to have some hard, brave conversations with our senior stakeholders to get there. But at the end of the 6 weeks, the decision was clear. The business case could not proceed. Organisationally, they weren't ready for the change. So we had reached an organisation rebound, a processing of a truth, and landing on a clear decision was really liberating for everyone involved. And I would also say stopping something or saying no is a really hard thing to do. And maybe that'll be a topic for my next talk, particularly when there's lots of people involved. So to end, I wanted to give you a summary of what I think helped this exploration squad succeed. So the first being the importance of 3 perspectives, 3 unique perspectives. It's far more powerful than one, or even a bigger number of people. There's this collective intelligence that emerges that is greater than the sum of its parts. The second is around being kind to yourselves and the people involved and appreciating how hard decision making is. And because of that, being clear and concise with how you communicate. Challenge yourself to fit things on one page and bring the space, like bring people to the space where the decision making can take place. And be really clear on the problem you're solving. It might not be the first way it's described to you, which is sometimes a symptom rather than a root cause. And then pair that with being ruthless about exploring the why, like quantify your benefits. And then fourth, don't fall for endless research and work. It's important to time box your efforts and be pragmatic about what good enough looks like to reach a decision. And then finally, bring an open mindset, be curious about who you meet, ask lots of questions, listen. And if something hard needs to be said, tell the truth and be brave, like really, really brave. So that's it from me, but I would love to open it up. I see we've got about 5 minutes left. Does anyone have any questions? And I am an open book. You could ask me anything at all. Yes, go for it, David.
Thank you for a wonderful talk. Very interesting, hearing the perspectives. A question from my side, because empathy and trust is important for me, and I know when you work in a place that doesn't necessarily have the trust, and you start building it up and getting people involved and getting communication and building a brave space, the realization that your efforts have actually resulted in trust coming back to you, that it's starting to form in the environment you're working in, sometimes comes unexpectedly. Like someone makes a comment they never would have, or like, wow, that I didn't expect that to happen. Did you have any of that kind of experience with the teams you worked in the case that you described, where you kind of realized, oh, this is where trust is starting to form?
Any moments of aha, like, I feel the first couple of weeks were really tricky. You know, when I was saying, I honestly, I haven't had to work that hard with people to get people to open up and to soften and to start sharing. I think that started to shift, and a lot of this is based on like listening to what you're hearing and then playing back the importance of going, this is what I'm hearing from you. And then like the certainly by week 4, when we were able to digest all that information and summarize on a page like the complexity of what was going on at that organization, I think that was a big click for us. So yeah, it's not easy. That first couple of weeks, the early bit is always the hard bit, right? But I think probably just the importance, listen, and play back what you're hearing is key, that first step. Yes, go for it, Lucy.
Hi, just wondering if you have continued to work with the organisation and if you're aware of them taking forward any of your practices that you applied, and if so, like which ones?
Yeah, that's such a great question. Yes, which is such a big, we're really, really proud of this. Like, so this organisation, they've got a number of portfolios. In other places, it might be, fleets or like 4 big areas. And they're looking at introducing a product delivery and tech lead across each of those portfolios. And a key part of those roles will be around this exploration activity. So there's a lot of demand and opportunities and problems that are constantly coming in. At the moment, these portfolios are they don't have that skill set. They don't have those 3 perspectives to help like process and what's the right thing, what's the most valuable thing, what do we say no to? And yeah, that's kind of come directly dotted line from this work that we did at the start of the year.
Excellent.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we're really proud of that. I think I saw some questions in the chat. Let me have a look. Okay. Enjoying. So Peter's saying, I've often found when I join a new company, it's easy to bring in outside perspectives and new ideas that sometimes help unblock problems, but quickly I pick up on this is how it's always been done, or yes. Any suggestions to maintain the openness while still learning about the company's existing systems and ways of working? Yes, that's such a great question, because we were definitely meeting that resistance quite a bit, Peter. I mean, I think I've got Alex and James on the call, not to put them on the spot, but feel free to add to anything that I say here. I think, I mean, there's a kind of relentlessness that you have to bring, like a kind of energy and, like listening, empathizing, but then that bravery to kind of go, here's the challenge, or maybe I've seen it work like this here, and this is what's possible, and this is the change. You kind of have to, it's that trust element that it's going to be different this time, and you're going to be able to see it through. Yeah, Alex and James, I don't suppose, feel free to jump in if you've got anything to add there.
I could add the saying, but staying curious is probably one of the keys to not allow yourself to swim in the ways of working into this is how we've done things forever. Just keep on asking them, but why you keep on doing this? And yeah, I think that helps keeping the fresh perspective in a way, even though you start acquiring months of working in the same place.
Yeah, that makes sense. And also, I would just riffing on that and thinking aloud, I would say, like, be willing to be wrong a lot, or at least be willing to have your opinions, critiqued. It's hard sometimes to put your ideas out there, put your thoughts out there, which is why trust is so important. But I think if that trust is not quite there yet, be brave enough to be candid and to accept that you're there in the pursuit of something which is bigger than you, and it's quite hard to manage that personally and emotionally. But that's the cost of doing good work.
Yes, yeah, I agree with that. Thank you so much, James and Alex. Sorry to put you on the spot. But I'm just looking at the chat. I think Alison and Giles, I think that those points that Alex and James were making sort of hopefully gives you some inspiration around those questions. Yeah, I think we're coming to the end. Any other questions at all?